Welcome to the expert sessions Unraveling Greentech. This is brought to you by Xperience Greentech Pvt Limited. We are the first of its initiative to incorporate artificial intelligence, analytics, etc. to assist people in buying a suitable, sustainable product while allaying the fears and reservations they have towards such products. Expert Sessions is an initiative to bring a different perspective from across the world on sundry green technologies and how they can be our hope to avert catastrophic climate change. Today, we have with us Dr. Saurabh Biswas. He is a sustainability scientist and a post-doctoral researcher at Arizona State University. Dr. Biswas previously obtained his Ph.D. from ASU itself, focusing on the energy poverty nexus, sustainable future action research. He is also BEE certified energy auditor in India and has worked as an assistant professor previously at UPES Dehradun, which makes him a perfect source of linkage between industry and academia. Dr. Biswas is a seasoned expert on sustainability transactions and is valued and recognized in the field for his significant contribution to the society. We welcome you, Dr. Biswas.
Thank you for the introduction. As we move forward with the session, firstly, I thank Dr. Biswas for agreeing to be a part of the expert session today. My personal preference to have Dr. Biswas is referenced from my experience of being his student, and your work and sincerity towards climate change has fueled a lot of research ethics into us. And as I believe that yet today that we are going to learn something new from you. So having said that, let me start simply by asking you, what is your opinion on climate change, and do you think we are working efficiently enough to manage this change before we reach a point of irreversibility?
Thank you, Moinat. Thank you, Xperience Greentech, for organizing this. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So yes, let's begin with your question, Moinat. And what do I think about climate change? And I would, move on to include sustainability in that. So let's begin by revisiting the idea of what exactly climate change is. So for those who may not be aware, climate change has been framed by earth scientists largely as changes in the 9 systems, the natural systems that create the planetary boundaries of existence and healthy life. So these include global warming, the warming of the atmosphere, the nitrogen cycle, biodiversity, oceans, and several others. Earth systems that are necessary for maintaining healthy life for the planet and the people. So there is no question, and I think it's fairly visible, and the evidence is very clear on the changes in our climate, largely accelerated in the last century or so by human activity. So there's definitely change in our atmospheric temperature by virtue of increased emissions. There is increased ocean acidification. There is enormous amounts of biodiversity loss. And we are in the boundaries, pushing the boundaries for each of the 9 planetary cycles that are necessary for a healthy planet and consequently human life. So there is definitely a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of action that needs to happen to correct and bring back the balance among Earth systems and human societies. As far as irreversibility goes, so let me take that question in 2 ways. So one is the quantitative irreversibility of the cycles and achieving previous levels, right, of emission or rate of change of temperature or acid or natural cycles. So yes, the goal is to reduce human-induced changes and acceleration and bring it, lower it so that it remains within those boundaries. So there is the reversibility, irreversibility aspect of bringing those cycles back into balance. However, from a human nature interaction point of view, irreversibility is a difficult concept to handle. So there have been societies and peoples around the world who have already lost livelihoods, who have already been exposed to health risks, displacement due to climate change. So that suffering, that's already irreversible, right? The best we can do in terms of the human and social cost of climate change is to prevent from further challenges to occur. So natural system irreversibility, so as I said, is something that we strive for, and we are very much pushing the boundaries on that, and there is enormous amount of coordinated action required to achieve reduction in those, so that natural cycles do not fall out of balance and become irreversible. And then the other is the human and social aspect of climate change, where we have already exceeded boundaries in terms of human cost, and irreversibility there would mean preventing further costs.
Fair enough. I mean, I completely agree with your point, and it's kind of a new reflection that we are trying and developing here. Moving on, I would ask you that what's your opinion on the fact that India of late has been the only country amongst the G20 to follow the Paris Accord? And what is your opinion on that? What do you think about it?
I mean, generally, it's an encouraging sign that as a country, as an economy, there is some positive movement towards increasing the share of renewable energy in the energy mix and cutting down on the energy intensity of the economic and industrial processes in the country. However, I would be very cautious with taking that argument too far and making too much out of it, because there are multiple aspects which are not very obvious with the idea of achieving Paris targets. For example, the targets that are being achieved and that are projected to, the reduction in carbon emissions that are projected to happen by 2030 for India are 2-degree compatible targets, right? Which is, we know, is not a sufficient goal. So what the target is 1.5-degree compatible emission reductions. So, and that's quite far in real terms to achieve. The other worrying aspect is that in the last couple of years, the reduction has coincided with a slowdown of the economy and reduction in industrial processes and overall contraction of energy demand. So there must be a point where this would start to turn the tide, and industrial processes and the economic growth would resume. And the worry there is, in the absence of a reasonable green recovery plan, the gains would be lost, and this would not be a continuing trend. So the point is that even if there has been a momentary achievement of certain targets, it's no guarantee of continued achievement and following the trajectory to a decarbonized energy system. Now, it should be noted that energy system is only part of the overall targets and overall ambition of working towards preventing climate change and achieving the 1.5-degree target. Forest cover, for example, is a major aspect of achieving those targets, and India has not been really doing well in achieving forest cover rehabilitation. In fact, it's going on the negative like reduction in forest cover. So this brings us to the greater picture that yes, there may be achievement on one or two aspects of achieving overall sustainability. That is definitely cause to be hopeful and opportunistic about and optimistic about achieving further targets, but we should not lose sight of the bigger picture and the other aspects which are equally, if not more important.
All right. So when we talk about the concept of sustainability, understandably, it's a term which is often misunderstood. So since it has so many parameters attached to it, can you give us a kind of a precise description, like what a sustainability should be, like how it should be defined to a layman?
Sure. So it's interesting that after so many years of pursuing sustainability as a global goal, there is a lot of ambiguity about its definitions, in which, in my opinion, is a healthy sign of an idea, of a concept, of a discipline that is trying to engage with a challenge that is very contemporary and current. So it demonstrates how this is co-evolving with it. So let me talk about the idea of sustainability first, the concept. So sustainability is at a conceptual level is a sensitizing concept, or an ethic, you might call it, a social ethic of balance and harmonious coexistence. So you would find this in ethical paradigms in different cultures over different times, the idea of balance and harmony between actions. So at an ethical level, sustainability is a very similar sensitizing concept that is about balance and harmonious coexistence. Now, scientifically, at the scientific level, sustainability has come to be described as the coexistence of social, environmental, and economic benefits at the interface of people and nature. Or in other words, the triple bottom line of sustainability, as it is called, commonly known as the people, planet, and profit paradigm. So human activity that benefits society as a whole in terms of achieving better quality of life, at the same time preserves planetary cycles and planetary resources and Earth, the planet, as a place where humanity, which humanity calls home, preserving the planet and making sure that the long-term sustenance of the planet is not harmed. So that brings in the generational perspective, as you might have known, the original definitions of framings of sustainability focused on the intergenerational aspect, like handing over the planet to our next generations. And then there comes the economic aspect, or profit, where resources are utilized and gains are generated that are used by human society to achieve outcomes. So sustainability as a science works at the intersection of these three ideas and trying to find the balance and the coexistence between the three dimensions. What is important to understand here from a scientific perspective is that among these three dimensions, there is not a priority order. So it's an idea of balanced coexistence, or what we call polycentric systems, that there is three nodes in the system and each of the aspects or the nodes are equally important. There is no relative importance assigned to any one of the three. And that makes it a dynamic process. So you have to figure the science is about figuring out different activities in each domain that keeps the balance going. The other concept, that underlies the science of sustainability, is the idea of non-additivity. So which means that achieving more in one dimension does not compensate for underachieving other dimensions. So that does not. So for example, generating a high amount of profit and creating a large amount of wealth for people will not compensate for harm or diminishing planetary resources, right? So it's non-additive. So achievement has to be, the balance has to be created semi-independently in each of the three domains. And finally, what makes this scientific process complex, or the relationship complex, is the co-evolution dynamics between the three. So nothing is stationary. The planet is changing. There's the planetary metabolism that is happening, irrespective of human activity, right? Human activities add to it, contribute to it in many other ways. And at the same time, human societies are changing in terms of, in sheer number terms, the number of people on the planet are growing, and also in terms of activities and actions that happen in different places. So there's always trying to figure out what affects what in terms of the co-evolving dynamics. So that's the scientific aspect of sustainability.
Well, fair enough. I mean, if I have to talk about the human factor into sustainability, as you just mentioned, and talking about a concept called as low impact living, that has been readily taken up across the globe right now, but again, dependent on the geographical dimensions of the world and the capacity with which people have access to resources. How do you think low impact living can make an impact in real terms and cater to the larger goal of sustainability?
Sure, that's a very good question, because having, we discussed the idea of sustainability and trying to achieve balance and trying to figure out which action to take. In the present paradigm that we exist in the present world, actions are largely determined by existential crisis, right? So which effects of unsustainable living, what are the outcomes of unsustainable living, require urgent action, and that prioritizes action in terms of people, governments, industry, and whoever the different kinds of actors in this mix are. So the real question actually is, can people afford to not be low impact, low environmental impact in their lives? So people's lives, you would have pictures of people going about their everyday life, work life and family life, and going to the stores and getting stuff and cooking and eating and vacationing and all that stuff. But all of these activities as individuals, as societies, are in some way connected, right? So we live in a networked world, and actions somewhere have an impact, a magnified impact or a diminished impact at a different part of the world. Sustainability science spends a lot of time thinking about those cascading impacts and the feedbacks that occur as a planetary, human, and technological systems. In other words, called the social, environmental, and technological systems. So, and because these are connected, sometimes strongly, sometimes not so strongly, effects travel throughout the network and the system, right? So there is no denying the fact that excessively consumerist lifestyles at an individual level are not only environmentally unfriendly. I mean, for example, take plastic consumption or other kinds of resource consumption. Excessive consumerism of any commodity has an immediate impact on your surroundings and your local environment, right? Because the more you consume, the more waste you would generate, for example. So that's the immediate dimension. However, it is also connected, and the impact travels in a large way. So high consumerism is fueled by production. If you are consuming, then this means someone is producing the goods and commodities somewhere. And then there is that displaced impact. It could be environmental, it could be local pollution, climate change, emissions, or social. I mean, one of the biggest challenges that we face today of consumerist lifestyles is the sustenance of economic and industrial structures which are by nature extractive. Either they're extractive of resources, they're extractive of human capital. So there is no question that high consumerist lifestyles are definitely a challenge at a local to global scale. Let's see some of the examples, right? In India, in the last several years, water shortages have become the norm in most places, right? The water quality issues have been there for a long time now, as long as you can remember, in major population centers. Food shortages, droughts, food production challenges, which leads to price fluctuation. And this is a classic example. Water and food are as basic necessities of human life, and how these create feedbacks and cascade effects in different aspects of life are classic examples of how high consumerism and industrialized models of industrialization are really not sustainable, because these cascade into scarcity in food and water throughout the globe over time, has cascaded into social unrest and tensions. And in extreme cases, it could lead to conflict, as you can see in Syria, Yemen. You can boil down one of the major causes of those conflicts to be food and water shortages in public life. So they are inextricably connected. So low impact living is a key ethic that needs to be inculcated in term as a society and as individuals.
Well, it's a very interesting thought that you have put forward, and so would like to ask you about your very proclaimed project, the coveted project that you did, linking energy and poverty and the sustainable transitions. So I would ask you that how did you, can you give us a basic brief of the project that you did and what motivated you to do this kind of a project? And if your project has to be compared with something that is already going on in India, like Saubhagya and Ujala, like India's flagship programs, can we draw parallels to that? If you were to be doing that project solely in India, how would you have done it, and if there would have been any difference?
Right. So my research on the nexus of energy and poverty in different parts of the world explores the challenge that energy systems have historically created, and how not only the inaccess to energy, electricity, cooking fuel, transportation fuel, not just the inaccess. Of course, there's a huge population, percentage of the population globally that does not have proper access to energy resources, and they have their own set of challenges, which is again a function of geopolitical and economic systems in those parts of the world, but also in places that have energy supply, places that have a grid supply, places that have established supply chains for cooking fuel. There is a huge incidence of poverty in those places as well. So my research has been focused on understanding in what ways energy systems have the potential in the first place to ease some of the existential challenges in human life in terms of creating better amenities, better access to food, education, and enabling a higher quality of life, but also how energy systems create burdens in people's lives and prevent them from achieving a greater well-being and quality of life. And energy systems, one should not forget, are an essential element of the idea of society and the way society is organized in most countries around the world, right? So energy systems have become central over the last 100 or so years as an important fundamental block of economy, of society. So the energy systems carry a lot of political capital and social capital with them. So in what ways it intersects with the idea of achieving well-being and sustainability. So this interlinkage between energy systems and poverty is a typical representation of the sustainability challenge that spans across the three pillars, right? And so the goal of my research and the projects that I do is to explore sustainable energy transitions in different places, right? So it's not going to be a uniform transition for everyone. People live in different conditions and under different geographical, political, economic conditions. So energy transition would look very different in different contexts. So how the objective of my work and the projects I do is to explore what kind of reorganization is required in energy production, ownership, and usage so that it is a positive enabler of human and environmental well-being, right? And this, I've done this work in rural places around the world, in urban slums. So, and there are similarities, but there are also very place-specific, unique characteristics. Now, when you think about energy access or rural electrification programs like the ones you mentioned that have been undertaken as government policy, I mean, there is no contending the fact that that's the kind of action that is required, and that's similar to creating access to water and food supply systems. We have historically considered electricity to be a social good. So the role and the responsibility of the state to provide for a social good is unquestionable, and it's a responsibility vested in the state. So these programs are necessary and has happened everywhere in the world. However, we are at a place as humanity and society where mere access to infrastructure and energy service is not sufficient anymore. That's a conversation, that's a river bridge that we have crossed maybe 30 years ago. Now is the time to think more holistically, because our as humanity, we have moved to a place where we are aiming for sustainable futures. So, and if you look at energy access or electrification from that lens, there is a lot to be done. So the massive scale that programs like Saubhagya or Ujjwala are able to achieve by virtue of being government-sponsored programs and being able to use the state machinery is unparalleled. That I don't think there is another form of governance that would be able to create that degree of access at the required pace and scale. However, the fundamental idea behind creating energy access is not aligned with sustainability goals of society as a whole. So there's a fundamental reorientation required towards sustainability in how we plan and build energy systems.
Lovely answer, sir. It's very insightful, and since we are running out of time, I would just like to quickly put you the last question. What's your take on the organization that we are representing, the innovation that we are bringing onto the table? Can you just quickly tell us about it, if you have any opinion or if you have any suggestions or recommendations?
I think it's very exciting what you all are trying to achieve, primarily because information and transparent knowledge plays a huge role in creating shifts as individuals, as consumers, as professionals working in professional places, or as decision makers, whether as an individual or in any other role as a social entity. Information and knowledge plays a huge part in making decisions, in making well-informed decisions. So I think the challenge that you all are trying to address is a very relevant and challenge, and it is useful to create support systems that would enable people to make better decisions. And better decisions are enabled by a systematic thought process. So any technology intervention or idea that helps broaden the systematic thinking process in individuals is always welcome. I look forward to understand more about the work that you all are doing, and I would be happy to contribute. But overall, I think this is a commendable effort that you all are undertaking.
Thank you so much, Dr. Biswas. It's very reassuring when you have, when you sometimes give the praises, and it's very encouraging at the same time. It's rare, but it's good at times for us. So, well, this wraps our session, and I must admit that your research and your contribution that you have made so far have triggered some serious thoughts to our minds in terms of research. It was a great session indeed, and I expect the viewers who will be viewing this over the various social platforms will gain certain insights and will channelize their thoughts in the way that you want them to, or rather the holistic approach that you have provided, the larger picture, and then kind of funnel into the main goals. Furthermore, thank you, Dr. Biswas, yet again for your time and contribution today. We look forward to have you again for another several sessions as planned in the future. So in conclusion, I would say that with one of your thoughts that you said very beautifully, I really loved what you said about that Earth is continuously experiencing a metabolism. It's changing. So I would like to say that in an ever-changing world, the single point of consistency is a motive coupled with motivation to address this burning issue of climate change. So I hope that we do justice and we emerge victorious in whatever we are doing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.